Hello, I'm Nima Rajan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be co-hosting a virtual conference today with the UN Secretary General and Jamaica's Prime Minister. The goal is to develop a coordinated response to the devastating social and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The UN estimates that without a global recovery plan, the pandemic could force 34.3 million people into extreme poverty this year and cut about $8.5 trillion from the world economy. More than 50 heads of state and government are to participate, as well as representatives of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the private sector. The Prime Minister also will meet today to discuss two topics with the premiers and territorial leaders: the operation of long-term care homes and paid sick leave for workers. Some premiers aren't happy with Justin Trudeau's promise to ensure 10 days of paid sick leave for workers who fall ill with COVID-19 or who need to go into quarantine after exposure. Ontario Premier Doug Ford welcomes the offer of federal help for long-term care facilities where thousands of residents have died of COVID-19, and he is calling for national standards for the homes. Doctors have reported that the first two COVID-19 patients in Canada to receive plasma transfusions rich in antibodies are showing signs of improvement. The patients are part of a controlled, randomized trial that is testing whether a transfusion of plasma donated by recovered COVID-19 patients can reduce deaths and speed up recovery. At least 5 patients had received transfusions by yesterday, with more joining the trial daily in Ontario and Quebec. Police in Calgary have launched a hate crime investigation after the wall of a Chinese consulate building was defaced with graffiti. 3 suspects wearing masks and black clothing were caught on video early yesterday, spray painting vulgar messages referencing COVID-19. Officials around the world have reported an increase in hate crimes against the Chinese community and people of Asian descent who have also been scapegoated during the pandemic. Toronto's Trinity Bellwoods Park is getting a COVID-19 paint job today. City officials say the popular downtown spot, a lightning for criticism after a crowd of thousands gathered there over the weekend, will see circles painted on the ground to show what is and is not appropriate physical distancing. Premier Doug Ford has urged everyone who was at the hotspot last Saturday to get tested for COVID-19. Alberta wants to set maximum time limits for energy project approvals. Energy Minister Sonia Savage says it takes too long for the Alberta Energy Regulator to make such decisions. If proposed legislation is passed, it would allow Premier Jason Kenney's cabinet to put timelines in place. The bill fulfills a promise Kenney made in the spring 2019 provincial election campaign. The Chinese embassy in Ottawa is angrily denouncing a ruling in the case of tech executive Meng Wanzhou, who is wanted on fraud charges in the U.S. Experts are warning 2 Canadians imprisoned in China could face retaliation because the BC Supreme Court ruled that the charges Ms. Wanzhou faces in America could also be a crime in Canada, and the case should proceed. But Canada is holding firm, with Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne calling for the release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Fires are burning and looting is taking place after violent protests over the death of a black man in police custody rocked a Minneapolis neighborhood for a second straight night. Mayor Jacob Frey has appealed to the governor to activate the National Guard. The protests began outside the police precinct in the part of the city where 46-year-old George Floyd died on Memorial Day. 4 Minneapolis officers were fired after video footage showed one of them kneeling on the handcuffed Floyd's neck until he became unresponsive. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit the U.S. economy even harder than first estimated. The U.S. Commerce Department reports gross domestic product fell at an annual rate of 5% in the first quarter. It's the biggest quarterly decline since the depths of the 2008 financial crisis. The current quarter is expected to be far worse. U.S. President Donald Trump is fighting back on efforts to fact-check his tweets. He is threatening social media companies with new regulations or even closure after Twitter added fact checks to 2 of his recent tweets. President Trump, a historically prolific White House tweeter, claims that tech giants silence conservative voices. Manhunts have begun after hundreds of people, some with the coronavirus, fled quarantine centers in Zimbabwe and Malawi. Authorities worry they will spread COVID-19 in countries whose healthcare systems can be rapidly overwhelmed. In Malawi, more than 400 people recently repatriated from South Africa fled a center at a stadium. They jumped over a fence or simply strolled out of the gate while police and health workers watched. Police and health workers told reporters that they were unable to stop them as they lacked adequate protective gear. At least 46 escapees had tested positive for the virus. India is facing a triple disaster with scorching temperatures, locust swarms, and a coronavirus toll growing by thousands of new infections each day. The heat wave threatens to compound the challenges of containing the virus, which is spreading more quickly and broadly since the government began easing restrictions of one of the world's most stringent lockdowns earlier this month. At the same time, swarms of desert locusts have devastated crops in India's heartland, threatening an already vulnerable region that is struggling with the economic cost of the lockdown. A Catholic archbishop has accused an Australian state government of inequitable pandemic rules by allowing up to 50 people into pubs while church congregations are limited to 10. Sydney Archbishop Anthony Fisher encouraged Catholics to sign a petition calling on the New South Wales government to treat churches the same as pubs, restaurants, and cafes. New pandemic restrictions that take effect on June 1st increase the number of customers from 10 to 50. Archbishop Fisher said he was standing up for the freedom of worship and asking for equal treatment when he sees so many double standards being applied to people of faith. China's National People's Congress has approved a national security law for Hong Kong that will require the territory to enforce measures to be decided by the NPC's Standing Committee. China is tightening control over Hong Kong following 11 months of anti-government protests. Activists say the law will undermine the high degree of autonomy that China promised to extend to the former British colony. Well, that'll do it for today's news update. I'm Nima Rajan. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.